Hello, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Story here on Keystroke Medium. I'm Josh Hayes here with Scott Moon, and today we are talking with Thaddeus White, one of the 14 authors who contributed to Explorations Through the Wormhole, the anthology by Woodbridge Press. The anthology series is a collection of themed short stories set in a shared universe where authors were given a set of rules and technologies and then set loose to create or destroy however they saw fit. Thaddeus, known for his Bane of Souls series, has contributed dead weight to the anthology, and today we're going to talk to him about what inspired the story and what it was like to write in a shared universe. Thaddeus, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thaddeus, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing?
I certainly can. The first thing that I wrote was Bane of Souls, which is a fantasy novel that came out in 2012. And following on from that, in the same world, I wrote Journey to Alt Mortis. And those two had overlapping characters, and some characters would be a major character in one and then a minor in the second. So it's quite nice to return to characters in that way and develop some a bit more. And they fit together quite nicely. After that, I wrote The Adventures of Sir Edric, which is a fantasy comedy, a bit like Blackadder or Flashman, or if Red Dwarf had been fantasy rather than sci-fi.
Oh, yeah.
And that follows Sir Edric, rather obviously, who's this vain, arrogant, selfish, greedy, thieving, terrible human being, and his manservant dog, who's heroic and loyal and intelligent and good and just, and if there were any justice in the world, he'd be the main character and he'd be the knight. But he's not. He's a peasant, and he basically does most of Cedric's heroics for him. So yeah, that's quite fun to write. And as well as those, I've had a few short stories. I've had horror stories in Malevolence, Tales from Beyond the Veil.
Okay. And
also in The Haunting of Lake Manor Hotel, which is the previous Woodbridge Press anthology.
Right. So let's talk about Deadweight. You submitted that to the Explorations Through the Wormhole anthology. Let's talk about that and the characters.
Yeah, the characters, it's a set about the crew of a Chinese smuggler ship called Winged Oasis. And they're being chased by the Imperial Navy when suddenly a wormhole swoops in and rescues them from being pummeled. And they're in the middle of nowhere. And of course they're quite relieved because they were about to be destroyed. But the ship's a wreck. The food and water supply is rubbish. There are holes in the hull. And they don't know if they've got enough food to sustain getting back home. Meanwhile, the power fluctuations has allowed an alien which they've been illegally transporting to break free. And it's about the tension between the crew, because there's an obvious answer, which is, if you're the captain, who's Guan Shi, the main character, you could push one or two of them out of an airlock. Or you try and make the food last. Right. But because of the situation, which is the ship's falling to pieces, people start dying, and they don't know if it's a crew member or if it's the alien that's escaped.
So it's kind of a whodunit type.
Right.
Yeah, it's a whodunit in a kind of a submarine claustrophobic setting, because obviously you can't run anywhere because they're in the middle of nowhere. They're not around a planet or anything like that. They're in, outer space, literally between the stars. So yeah, it's about who can you trust in that kind of situation.
Very interesting. And was this the first idea that you had for the anthology? Did you go through several before you got here?
Weirdly, this actually was my first idea. Normally what happens is I have an idea and then for some reason it doesn't work, and then I have another and then another, and then you hit on something which eventually does work. Like for the next anthology, which is fantasy, in which I also have a short story, I had a brilliant idea which completely didn't work. But for this, it was first time lucky, which is nice.
Yeah. It's always good when you get 6,000 or 7,000 words into a short story and realize that it doesn't work.
Or you can always use it someplace else with a lot of those ideas, I imagine.
Yeah, I will try and, if I can, recycle the first idea I had for the fantasy story, because I don't want to go too much into detail because I might write it, but it was going to have a kind of Arabic setting at night, a chase across the desert, and I thought that that had quite a lot of potential to be interesting and to be a bit different from most of the fantasy. But when I came to write it, it just wouldn't go anywhere, which is a bit frustrating as a writer, obviously. And I had another idea, so I went for that, and that worked quite nicely.
You might need a little time to germinate a lot of ideas I have. I think I'm done with them, and then they just keep popping back up like one of those relatives or something. Yeah, like a bad penny. That's what I was looking for.
So tell us a little bit about your writing and what the process is like going from concept or idea to finished product.
What I'll usually do for a short story, I'll go through the ideas, cycle through them until I find one that seems like it might work. And then I'll try and expand that into 3 bits, the beginning, middle, and end, which is a cliche, but it works. And if that works, then I'll go into a bit more detail and break down a sequence of events. Not, loads of detail, it'll be like 7 things or something like that. Fill in the characters' names and, ship name in this case. And then I'll just set about trying to write it from that and see if it works, see if it's too long, too short. But that's something that I'll usually fiddle with at the end if I need to, add or remove words. After that, of course, send it off to beta readers, and they'll, tell me the various ways in which it's crap, and then I'll improve it. And then you sacrifice a goat to Apollo, and then you send the story off to the publisher. And I can see you laughing at that, but don't laugh.
No,
I got a story in this anthology, in the last anthology, in the next one. Apollo works.
Nice.
There you go.
So are you traditionally published for the most part? Are you indie published?
Mostly it's self-published. Sir Edric's a bit weird because that's 2 novellas put together, so it is novel length. The first novella was initially Sir Edric's Temple, self-published, but the second part of it, Cedric's Treasure, has only ever been traditionally published. Bane of Souls and Journey to Out Mortis are both self-published. Sorry, go on.
I said it's interesting. We talk a lot about hybrid publishing and stuff, but that's literally hybrid publishing in one kind of manuscript with the 2 novellas being put together like that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's probably quite unusual to do that. I do think, like you say, hybrid publishing is something that I think a lot of people will do because, frankly, if you're in the lower half, or even if you're doing quite well and middling, you'll make more money self-publishing because obviously you don't have a publisher taking a big slice of the cake.
Right.
It's only if you're mega successful, like J.K. Rowling or George R.R. Martin, that you'll make more money with traditional publishing. And I think it's a good mix to go sometimes self-published and sometimes traditional, because traditional just makes some things easier, like you don't have all the formatting problems or getting the cover sorted or things like that, and you have someone to give you a hand with marketing, although you still have to do it. I mean, I'm doing this now obviously, and this is a traditionally published anthology, but I think it's a good mix to have some one and some the other.
So what do you think about the difference between writing a novel-length work or a short story? Is it a different process or just expanded one from the other?
It's a little bit different because short stories, I tend to have them from a single character perspective, which is also the way that I write Sir Edric, and that makes it easier to plan and also easier for things like continuity, because you don't have to try and make all the events stick together in sequence. Well, you do, but it's a lot easier because you've got one point of reference, whereas with novels I'll usually have quite a few different perspectives, so to make them all knit together with the various events, that takes more time, which means more planning and then more redrafting as well. So for me, novels, apart from Cedric, who's quite easy usually, it takes much longer. I mean, even given proportionally for the word count. But at the same time, you can get a lot more out of a novel, obviously, because you've got more characters, you've got more depth. You can have more interesting relationships and do more things because you've got 100,000 words to play with.
Right. Did you find that it was more difficult to establish a well-rounded character in the short story? How were you able to develop these characters with only this limited amount of words?
Well, that is probably the single most difficult thing, because you can't spend, when you've got 8,000 words, the first 4,000 introducing all the characters. And obviously, with a plot like this, you've got to have a few characters to kill off.
Right.
Because I think the way to do it is, or the way that I did it, was I threw them straight into an action sequence, which gave a chance to show what Guan Xi, the captain's, like. And then immediately into a high-stress situation. So another important character is Liu Pan, who's the navigator, and she's quite feisty, and she talks back. And when you're in a dangerous situation, which you are if you're on a ship and an alien's loose and it might be killing people, she's quite often telling Guan, "Look, let me go kill this." And he's like, no, stay here. And that can be a way to do it. Humour as well. That's something that I try to put in books anyway, because I think moments of levity, even in serious books, help make it more realistic. And comedy can be a good way of rounding out characters, I think, and also showing the kind of world there is. So in Bane of Souls, I had a slight problem because I made the city around which it revolves kind of metropolitan, so it was at the corner of 3 countries. But then I was thinking it's kind of medieval, and I didn't know if medieval people would be racist or not with these different cultures, how they'd react to that. So what I did was I made them all low-level, taking the piss racist, rather than, serious, murdering each other over anything.
Right.
And I think that comedy is a good way to go, mocking one another, that kind of thing. And that can quickly, you only need, I know I'm rambling about it, you only need a line or so to set up the situation there.
Do you have any favorite authors that inspire you?
A few. The one that really got me back into fantasy was Joe Abercrombie. I really liked the first Law trilogy and the other standalones that he's set in the same world. The characters, most obviously Glockter, had a flawed realism that I really liked. Moral greyness, where you don't have a good versus evil or anything like that, and you can appreciate both perspectives of sides in a war or an argument or something. That's something that I'd like to emulate in my writing. Although I've got to say, generally, my stuff isn't nearly as grim.
Right.
And is that purposeful?
It wasn't really a conscious choice. The first time I read back, again, going to Bane of Souls because it's the first book.
Sure.
I was a bit surprised it wasn't grimmer. It wasn't kiddie or anything like that. But I read it back and I thought, have I made this not dark enough? But I decided, that's my style. I don't want to be aping another writer or,
right.
trying to be the second best of someone else.
Right.
And it worked for me, so I've stuck with that style, and I think it works pretty well.
You've got enough books and stories under your belt now that you kind of found your voice, I'm sure. And
yeah, that's another thing. When you've the first time you're writing, whether it's a short story or a novel, there are so many things that you screw up just because it's the first time, and you don't know lots of things, either how to do something better or just a daft mistake to avoid. So with this, which is I don't know, 8th short story or novel that I've written, something like that, I've written enough that I know this is quite good, and I haven't made any stupid mistakes with it.
Where can readers find works by Thaddeus White if they want to read more?
Well, as I'm sure they all will, obviously on Amazon, where every writer has to be if they want to make any money. I also have some free stories up on Crackson magazine, which actually it has lots of good free stuff. And I've got a sci-fi serial on there, which is a 12-part story.
This has been Explorations Through the Wormhole. For Scott Moon, I'm Josh Hayes, and we've been behind the story of Dead Weight by Thaddeus White. The Through the Wormhole anthology will be available September 2016, published by Woodbridge Press, where you can find Thaddeus's story along with many others. And if you were intrigued by this interview, go and pick up that anthology, give it a read, leave us a like and review on Amazon. So thank you, Thaddeus, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Thanks.